explain how conservationists can use social marketing tools to move beyond traditional approaches to raising biodiversity awareness. She will also share examples of the effectiveness of pride campaigns in supporting conservationists to implement NBSAPs and achieve Aichi Biodiversity Target One. For more than 25 years, RARE has empowered local communities in over 50 countries to shift from being resource users to environmental stewards. RARE's unique approach appeals to hearts and minds through proven marketing techniques. RARE trains local conservation leaders all over the world to change the way their communities relate to nature. Its signature method is called Pride Campaign. So named because it inspires people to take pride in the species and habitat that make their communities unique, while also introducing alternatives to environmentally destructive practices. Pride campaigns are based largely on principles of social marketing and behavior adaptation techniques. Mr. Yepez is an Ecuadorian conservation biologist with 20 years of experience managing and executing conservation projects at the national and international level. During the last 5 years, as implementation director of the Watershed Program Director, Itala has successfully executed a portfolio of 18 pride campaigns focused on watershed conservation with local partners in different countries, including Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Mexico. Working with local NGOs, government, water companies, and other stakeholders, the implementation team has trained 18 local leaders and their organizations to use behavior adoption and social marketing techniques to achieve conservation objectives and reduce threats to water regulation ecosystems. I would like to welcome Mrs. Itala to this webinar session, and thanks for attending this invitation. It is really a pleasure to have you here today. As usually, before starting, I just want to remind some rules and dynamics for the NBSAP forum webinars. As many of you know, everybody will be on mute during the presentation. This diminishes the interferences and facilitates the communication. If you have any question, please send it through the control panel and we will be happy to assist you. We will have a 1-hour webinar, and at the end of her presentation, we will have around 30 minutes for questions and some discussion around this topic. Please send us your question in advance or raise your hand in the control panel. If you want to speak and the connection allows, we will open the participants' microphones to promote interaction. As many of our participants are not English native speakers, including me, I would like to remind Mrs. Itala the importance to talk slower. This facilitates the comprehension among our practitioners around the world. As usual, this session is being recorded and it will be available at the NBSAP Forum website, www.nbsapforum.net. All the participants will receive an email with a link to download this presentation, the list of resources, and the recording. Now, I will transfer the webinar to Mrs. Itala. Please enjoy the session. Again, thank you very much, and please enjoy the presentation.
Thank you so much, Diego. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. I wanted to start my presentation with a really fantastic story. It's called The Elephant and the Rider. So I'm going to put the video first, and then we will discuss around it. So as you saw in the video, behavior adoption needs the three sides of the story to work together. You can make change happen by directing the rider, motivating the elephant, and shaping the path. My objectives for this presentation are basically that at the end of it, you will be able to articulate ideas about how to create awareness and promote behavior adoption and how to contribute to conservation with them. We also want you to be able to explain what the prime methodology is and some of the technical fundamentals that are behind it. So let's start from the beginning. What is social marketing? RARE has developed a methodology that helps us to direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. It is called PRIDE, and in a big portion, it is based in social marketing technologies, behavior adoption techniques, and technical solutions for conservation. Let's ask ourselves for a second a question. Can marketing be used for social good? The answer is yes. Traditional marketing tries to pursue a target audience to invest in a product or service in order to get promised results. This appears to bring about change for the individual consumer long enough to make the purchase. Social marketing seeks to permanently change attitudes about social concerns, creating a change in the entire system or community. Do you think you have been exposed to social marketing? Now, how does social marketing work? Social marketing identifies deficit or needs that is determinant to social or environmental needs, educate the community about the need and solution, motivate the community to support change, and provide knowledge, attitude, and tools to make the change possible over time. Now, social marketing bases work in several principles. The first principle is related with the fact that information does not equal to behavior change. For example, some of you maybe smoke. If you do, you know that sometimes we want to leave smoking. We know smoking is not good for our health. We know that smoking basically damages our body. However, we still smoke. Simply knowing something does not mean that we do it. Many people, including environmentalists, living in the so-called developed world, know that riding a bicycle to work will reduce their carbon footprint, will be good for the environment, and will be more than healthy. Yet, they still drive to work because there are barriers to the behavior change. For example, if you don't have a lock for your bicycle, it's probably a problem. You need to arrive to work on time. You need to arrive at work clean. So all of those are barriers that are not allowing the people to take the decision to do the behavior change. We will discuss about the barriers in more detail in the further slides. Many traditional approaches to environmental education and outreach continue to follow the same path. They think that if they simply inform people about something, people will change their behavior. If we just put up, for example, a poster about deforestation, people will realize the error of their ways and they will stop. If we broadcast enough messages about dynamite fishing, surely fishermen will use nets, but that is not the case. Principle 2 of behavior change is basically that people care about themselves first. Because factors other than knowledge are likely to affect the way people behave, we should make individuals who the mission of our organization, of course, or a conservation goal. This is not to say that the mission or a conservation goal are not important. We need both to guide our work. But to achieve the mission or a conservation goal, we need to understand what motivates individuals for their behaviors we are trying to change, what they want and need, and how they can make ourselves relevant for our lives. In short, we need them to stop being organization-focused and become consumer-focused. To become consumer-focused, we basically have to do research, allowing our projects to be guided for the results of that research. We need to understand what motivates people to do what they are doing and what will motivate them to do what we want them to do. We also need to understand what are the barriers for that desired behavior change that we want to push. And we need to understand what they will want in return if they change that behavior. What is the cost that they are going to have for living the behavior that they are currently doing? And what is the cost of actually changing their behavior? Rather than developing campaigns and programs around what we think they need, we need to develop them around what we know they need, what we know they want, and what we know they request or they require to do the behavior change. So we need to ask our audience what is that they need to help them adopt the new behavior. Offer audiences members something that is valuable for them in exchange for the new behavior that we want them to pursue, and give them access to resources and skills to be able to adopt the new behavior. Consumer research in the form of a focus group, for example, or in-depth interviews, observational processes, or others, even surveys, can be very useful to reach that information and be able to use it to take decisions around the way we are going to communicate to people to make them change a particular behavior we want them to change. The principle number 3 is people must know what you want them to do. In commercial marketing, an organization is trying to sell a product, for example, shoes. However, it's not selling just a specific product, but a specific brand of a product. Not just any run shoes, but for example, Nike shoes. Similarly, we must be very specific in what we ask our audience to do. Sadly, too often we push our mission instead. For example, we put statements such as stop global warming, or eat more fruits and vegetables, or even save our orangutans. Those are pragmatic goals and not actions that individuals can actually make. So that makes it difficult for people to understand what we want them to do. They are too complex or too vague. However, buying a car with low emissions is something a consumer, for example, can do. It is also very important to remember that the action or behavior you are asking your audience to do has to be doable or feasible. For example, one should not ask fishermen to stop dynamiting fishing without providing them with a reasonable alternative. What is doable for a person is not doable for everyone. Asking Bill Gates, the head of Microsoft, for example, to buy a $250,000 car maybe is within his reach. But if you ask me or some of you, maybe that's not the case. So we have to make very specific asks to be able to achieve what we want. And finally, principle 4, behavior change is not easy. To get to behavior change, we need people to go through a process. Try to remember the process you went through, for example, when you were trying to stop smoking or when you wanted to go to the gym. For that, we need to pass several processes. The first one is called pre-contemplation, when people are not yet acknowledging that there is a problem and that there is a behavior change needed. The second step is contemplation, when people actually acknowledge that there is a problem, but they are not sure that they want to make a behavior change. The next step is preparation, When people are getting ready to change, the following step is action, when people actually do the behavior change. And the final step, and probably the most difficult to get to, is maintenance, when people maintain long-term the behavior change adopted. Another theory Rare used to base its work, it's called the theory of diffusion of innovation. Diffusion is a process by which an innovator it's communicated through certain channels over time among the members of a social system. Diffusion is a specific type of communication concerned with separate messages that are perceived as new ideas. An innovation, simply put, is, as for example, an idea perceived or a new behavior desired. This curve is interesting because it's basically telling us that only 2.5% of our population it's innovator, which basically means that only 2.5% of the people will be open to change when we ask a behavior change without really needing too much information. Then we have a 13.5% that are the early adopters. People that take a little bit longer probably than the innovators, but again, they don't ask too much. Those two first groups are the groups that we have to target with our campaigns. Why? Because after we have targeted that around 16% of the people in a particular community, for example, it's easier to have the others kind of imitating or following the innovators and the early adopters. So we have an early majority and a late majority that cover around 70% of our population. And then the laggards that are those people that are very, very hard to get to because they believe that the status quo is the right place to be in. So Rare trains local conservation leaders all over the world to change their communities relating to nature. Its signature method is called pride campaigns. So we name it because it inspires people to take pride in the species and habitats that make their community unique, while also introducing variables alternative to environmental destructive practices. Pride campaigns are based largely on principles of social marketing and behavior adoption techniques, fields that draw on the behavior sciences and uses techniques of commercial marketing to change behavior to achieve a specific social goal. Created by Paul Butler, that you see in the picture, in 1976, this method has been proven as a really effective contributor to conservation problems created by human behaviors. Well, so how do we actually work on this? Rares has something that is called the theory of change, which is essentially a comprehensive description and an illustration of how and why a desired change is expected to happen in a particular context or community. It is focused in particular or mapping out a feeling in what has been described as the missing middle between what a change initiative does and how this leads to desired behavior change. It does this by first interfering the desired long-term goals and then works back from this to identify all the conditions or outcomes that must be in place and how these relate to one another causally for a goal to occur. The stages are adopted primarily for Procasa and others in 1992. Fran's theoretical model of behavior change is used as part of this process. Individuals are motivated to make from one stage to the next one by new information and by influences or peers' opinions, by leaders generating interpersonal communication and constructing something that it's a movement basically created together within the community. Even this first image of Rare's theory of change is linear, it's not. So as you can see in that graph, we start with knowledge. That's only the first step. People receive information about a particular problem and a particular solution. Normally what happens afterwards is that people start generating the attitude to do the behavior change. but they are not sure yet. So they need to have interpersonal communication. With who? With people they trust. So they look for leaders, people that represent them, people from their family, their friends, and they talk about that behavior, that particular behavior change we want to encourage them to do. Again, we go back to the barrier point where we know that those people have barriers to do that behavior change, and we need to work with them. As a result of that, we will have that behavior change that will end up in a threat reduction and a conservation result. This is a more practical way of seeing the theory of change. Not always knowledge, attitude, and interpersonal communication are steps that go one after the other one. Sometimes we start with knowledge and we jump immediately to interpersonal communication. For people to actually develop the attitude after talking to others, peers, about the particular behavior change we are looking for. Barrier removal should be a constant. As you can see, it's below our theory of change and should start from the beginning to the end of the process. We need to understand through the research what are the problems or what are the barriers that people have to do the behavior change and work on them to break those barriers, as in the video we saw in the beginning, to be able to develop the right path for people to actually do the behavior change. So how does it look in the practice? A project starts with research, basically qualitative and quantitative, that will be the basis for the design of the social marketing strategy and behavior adoption intervention. With that information, our campaign managers create the theory of change and define the project objectives. Once that has been done, they design the social marketing strategy they are going to be using. And define the message strategy, the benefits they are going to be giving to the people to do the behavior change. And design a call of action. Remember that we said in principle 3 that we actually needed to be very clear in what is the thing we are going to ask people to do. With that, they work a concept that will be reflected in a creative brief. And that is basically a draft design of a series of materials, social marketing materials, as well as a branding. Then our campaign coordinators will validate their messages and materials with their community. That bit is very important because we really need to know that our audience understand what we are asking them to do. We really need to know that the images and the language is appropriate for the particular community we are going to be working in, that they relate with the colors of the materials, with the textures. If we use a mascot, that they actually relate with that particular species, etc. We do after that a modification of whatever material has been seen as not appropriate for that community. And then we need to produce and run, produce the materials and run our campaign. So PRA campaigns are run by local partners that are trained and closely supported by RARE. RARE's partners borrow proven private sector marketing tools like mascots, billboards, public events, and radio shows to promote more sustainable behaviors that benefit people and nature. Oftentimes, the first thing people recognize about our Rare Pride campaign are the charismatic mascots, creatively designed by partners to represent a flagship species for each and every campaign. What normally happens is that we do a process of votation in every community, and we select the most representative species for them for several reasons, maybe because they appear every time they are working in the field, or maybe because they remember those species but they haven't seen them anymore and they are worried because they have disappeared, or maybe because it represents something for them spiritually or socially. So that particular species is selected, and then it becomes a mascot. So how does this, how do they look like? How these campaigns look like in the field? We are going to see an example of a project that happened a couple of years ago in Valle del Cauca, Colombia. So our local partner, CVC, selected 7 sites in El Valle del Cauca. The sites were Tanque Guinea, Ruth, La Paila, Soncito, Bitaco, Fraile, and Pance. Those are particular watersheds that are very important for water provision in El Valle del Cauca. So the first thing that campaign coordinators did was build a threat tree, trying to understand what are the problems that are present and what are the roots of those problems and how they can probably see a future if those problems continue being there. So we defined that, like, basically in these areas, we have 3 main threats. The sediment from inappropriate managed construction sites, crop and forest lands, and eroding stream banks was the first one. Salt from irrigation practices and acid draining from abandoned mines was another one. And bacteria and nutrients from livestock, pet wastes, and faulty septic systems was the third one. So to solve these particular problems, we used a methodology that was developed several years ago by our partner Fundación Natura Bolivia in a place called Los Negros in Bolivia. And this is a very simple system where land owners in the upper part of the watershed define certain areas that they will conserve. And in return, they will receive some benefits to improve the way they manage their land. So they improve their land use practices and replace the old ones for better ones in terms of conservation. At the same time, in the lower part of the watershed, we have the water users, who normally really don't know where the water comes from, what is the relationship between water and forest, and especially what they can do to actually solve the problem they have, especially in dry season when there is scarcity of water. So they learn about the first thing is the relationship between water and forest, where the water comes from. And after that, they start working together to create a fund that is going to collect money, that is going to pay for the benefits that the upstream landowners are receiving once they sign up another contract. At the same time, to move the barriers, we create something that we call the management committees, which are basically formed for different people coming from different sectors in the watershed. So we have politicians coming from the municipality and other governmental organizations. We have representatives of the landowners. We have representatives of the water users. We have, for example, the priest in the community that is very important for them, and others. That committee, what it does is basically create a set of rules to select the farmers that are going to be part of the program, manage the fund, and provide the benefits for the landowners. At the same time, they have to monitor the water quality to be sure that the promise we did to the water users downstream becomes a reality. So they actually have proofs that water quality has been improving thanks to the system. And we have the local authorities and key influencers that participate in different ways along the process. So this is the people that participated. We have here 7 campaign coordinators, and one of them was also a general coordinator coming from CVC. The Corporación Autónoma Regional del Valle del Cauca, it's basically the authority, the environmental authority in El Valle del Cauca. Being an institution that has been seen more than anything as an institution that makes people to accomplish whatever they have to do in terms of the law, and now seeing them as people that actually come to the field and work with the landowners and work with the water users and understand the reality and support them to solve their particular problems has changed the way people used to see them along the campaign. So here we're going to see some images of how the campaigns look like in the field. This is an image that comes from Root, one of the watersheds, and this is the day where the campaign was launched. As you can see, the sloth is the mascot and is leading the parade that they used to launch the campaign with the firemen in town. HIDA director activity with downstream households. So what we do during the process of research is try to define within the audience who are actually those people who takes the decision. And in this particular case, the behavior change desire in the downstream audience was for people to pay an extra fee to do conservation. And after research, we discovered that the people that took that decision were actually the households. So they became the particular audience for this campaign, and they participate in several activities to change the way they used to see things and allow them to change their behavior. Here a visit to upstream areas with downstream water users for them to understand the relationship between forest and water, and especially what their role was in conservation. This is a photo of a typical parade, which we call community mobilization activity. And in this particular case, the campaign manager was able to have around 300 people participating in the parade. As you can see, the parade is led by this big sign that has a clear call of action. It also includes the logo and slogan of the campaign that was designed after research with elements that people recognize and feel related to. This is another example of a sign, and as you can see, the same elements are present. We have the mascot in one of the sites, and it's important to consider that we have to have the target audience as part of the material, so they identify with it. There is this is another set of materials that we use also to give people during the process. So if, for example, people attend to a meeting, they receive a cup or a bag or a water bottle. Again, all these materials have the logo and slogan of the campaign. Some of them have the mascot. Some of them have, well, the messages changed along the process of the campaign, depending on where we are. So if we are looking for knowledge, it's a knowledge message. If we are looking for attitude, it's an attitude message. And if we are looking for behavior change after removing all the barriers, it's already a call of action. Another example of materials. Here is a meeting with a recently created management committee. So as you can see, we have representatives of several institutions, and the meeting is led by the lawyer of CBC that is explaining them how they have to build or constitute legally in the community to actually be able to work. It's important to consider again that even the messages come in the printed materials, we have to repeat those messages in every single activity we do. So for example, here we have a theater piece where this person is repeating within the dialogue the messages that we have also in the materials. So basically being constant in the presentation of our messages in every single activity or material we have is very important for us. So after finishing these campaigns in the 7 sites, we saw several changes in the community comparing the results of research pre-campaign and post-campaign. So for example, here you can see shifts in knowledge and related to the importance of forest and water. We went from 85.9% of the people that actually knew what was the difference to 99%, which means that basically all the communities knew the relationship that exists between forest and water. The existence of sustainable product practices in the upper part of the watershed 75.7% of the people knew since the beginning that there are alternative productive practices. And at the end of the campaign, 97.5% of the community knew that there are alternative productive practices that can be put in place in their lands. And the benefits of adopting sustainable productive practices started with 61% in the beginning and ended up with 91.6% of the people that knew about those benefits. In terms of attitude shifts in upstream landowners, we have people that said that they agree that forest conservation in the watershed is important, going from 74.3% in the beginning to 81.6% in the end. And willingness to adopt alternative land management practices, it went from 70.8% to 87.3% at the end of the campaign. Probably this is the most interesting information we got. So as we mentioned before, interpersonal communication is really, really important for people to actually adopt a new behavior. So people were talking about alternative productive practices upstream. At the beginning of the campaign, only 29% did it. At the end of the campaign, 83.6% of the people reported that they have had at least one conversation related with this particular topic in the campaign. And also about the importance of forest and water and the relationship between them. There were conversations related with this topic, only 39% in the beginning, and it jumped to 89.7% at the end. As you probably remember, in our theory of change, interpersonal communication was the step before behavior change, which basically means that all these people are kind of ready to continue adopting these new practices and improving the way they manage their land. Downstream happens something very similar. So we have people that participate toward conserving forest or stream areas in the watershed. And we started with 18% in the beginning and 73.1% at the end. People that signed our document committing to land management changes, 2% in the beginning, and then we have 14% at the end. They did the behavior change already. And made land management changes with or without a contract. We started with 12% in the beginning and we jumped to 35%. So these are data related with behavior change itself. So in terms of knowledge for downstream areas, again, we jump, and you can see here from 78% to 86% for people that knew about the importance of forest and water, and the existence of a financial mechanism to contribute to upstream conservation went from 3% to 20.8%. In terms of attitudes, the willingness to make voluntary monetary contributions toward upstream conservation actions in the watershed, we had 66% in the beginning, and it jumped to 83% at the end. In terms of interpersonal communication, again, this is very important. We started with the importance about forest and water, so people talking about it. We started with 20% and we jumped to 62%. About the importance of participating in conservation activities in the watershed, we went from 18% to 41%. And about making regular monetary contributions toward conservation, we went from 5% to 34%. So as you can see, basically those are the kind of changes we can see socially, which is interesting because if you see this reflected in conservation, we ended up these campaigns with over 1,500 hectares under contract that were conserved. We end up with 37 landowners that sign up contracts at the end of the 2-year period of the campaigns, and with a list of 51 that want to sign in the next following months. We ended up with a very strong CBC that wants to use this methodology not just to solve this particular kind of problems, but actually want to use it as a transversal methodology to work out things like climate change, things like wetlands conservation, and others. So it's a very interesting methodology that gives you tools to work with local communities and ensure that the behavior change they do is actually promoting conservation changes in the field. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Many thanks, Itala, for this amazing presentation with the results of the social marketing. I really enjoyed it and learned from your presentation. Many thanks. I want to open the question and discussion session. I'm going to read the questions, but just send us through the question tab panel, or raise your hand in the control panel as well. If connection allows, we will connect the microphone. So please go ahead and send your questions. I have one first in terms of the graphic that you showed showing how people change the thoughts around the water and the watershed, and you show that these shifts are increasing the the conscious of the people around the topic. Have you run other statistics in order to see if after the campaign finishes, the people come back to the initial situation, or it is a change forever?
No, as we mentioned in the beginning, we need to work in maintenance. So yes, the answer is yes, we run several processes of research, pre-campaign, post-campaign, and then once every year for the next 5 years. Our objective is, or we believe, that if people actually understand that the benefit that they get for adopting these new land use practices goes directly to them. So for example, they see them as they see a return of investment. They own more money because they change it and they can now sell their products in green markets, for example. Or they are able to maintain their land and have a legal document that allows them to do it. And actually they can give it to their children when they die. Or, so we design benefits that are long-term and that represent a direct benefit for the people that are actually changing their behavior. So that allows them to maintain it long-term. But there is never a security that that's going to happen. So we have to run this research every year, at least for 5 years, to be sure that they maintain the behavior change long-term. And of course, because of that the conservation is happening.
Thank you. I have a raised hand from Nasrul Islam, and I'm so sorry if I spelled wrongly the names. I'm going to open the microphone now. Can you hear us? Hello? Hello? It seems that we have problems with the microphone. Hello? Okay, I'm going to open another question. Let me 1 second. Hello? Hola? Presa Smahili? Hello? It seems that we are having some problems with microphone. Okay. We have a question from Norma Sherry. She's asking, will the recording of this webinar be available for persons to access? The question is yes. We will publish this recording in the NBSAP forum website with a copy of the presentation, so everybody will have access to these two resources. I have another question from Valentina Coy. I'm going to open her microphone. Just 1 second. Valentina, can you hear us?
Yes.
Go ahead with your question, please.
My question was, what were the main barriers the community had at the beginning that first impeded the behavioral change?
So there were several and several type of barriers. One of them was, for example, that they historically managed the land in a particular way. They learned it from their grandparents and their parents, and they were so into their way of living that it was hard for them to see a different way of doing things. A second barrier was, okay, if we do this, what kind of benefits are we going to receive? You know, if we change this, is this going to cost us? And if it does, then why should we do it? So we basically had to define a system to cover the costs of those benefits initially until they actually see the investment of adopting these new practices. Another barrier was more legal. So, for example, legally in Colombia, every single landowner should have 15 meters from the river to their land of forest. And actually that doesn't happen. So a barrier there was like, okay, so if we're going to do this now, what the authority is it's going to say. If we're going to leave less than 15 meters because our property is only 1 hectare, are they going to come and punish us for that? Because now they are going to actually come inside of our properties and they are going to have access to see what we do. So there was a lot of fear. There was historical reasons. Some of them didn't have land property documents, so the program had to support them to get that as part of the benefit package. So there are different things, and again, that is very much individual. So the campaign managers have to go one by one, working with these landowners for them to change the behavior.
Thank you. I have another question from Niklas Hagelberg. I'm going to open the microphone. Can you hear us? Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. The cost was in terms of the steps of delivering this behavior change. I completely agree that it tends to be that we focus on the knowledge part and then we stop. But could you give an idea of, in terms of the cost of your project, how much cost went into knowledge, into changing the attitude, into the interpersonal communication and behavior change and so forth?
So every campaign manager get a budget of $35,000 for their 2-year campaign to produce, basically to do the research, produce their materials and branding, and run their social marketing activities. Some of them ended up with a spare money. They were a lot more effective than others. But let's say that the maximum they can spend on this is $35,000 to move their audience from wherever they are in the beginning to behavior change at the end.
Thank you. We have another question from Niranut. Let me 1 second. I'm going to open her microphone. Just 1 second, please. Niran, can you hear us?
Hi.
Hello? Hola.
Hi, Diego. Hola. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. And this webinar is very important for Thailand because we are thinking of having our own communication strategy. So we learned from your presentation. One of my questions is, we are thinking of having one celebrity represented the conservation campaign instead of creating a mascot. So from your experience, do you think which way will give more impact on attitude and behavioral change? Yeah, that's my question.
That's a very interesting question. And it will depend on the community. Again, try to go back to the beginning of my presentation. You need to do research. You need to understand who influences your audience, who they actually listen to. So if that particular celebrity is someone who is very well recognized in the community, and that person, you believe because of the results of your research that they can actually, or she or he can actually influence the decisions that your audience is going to be taking in the future, then use the celebrity. But if after your research you discover that that's not the case and that they relate much more with elements that are within their own area, so for example, a species or a particular person or the priest or whoever else, then use those elements that are relevant for your community in particular.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open microphone from Mihari Randrianaribero. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, of course. We would like also to ask the cost around the measurement process. You are telling about the CAP studies you are undertaking. So we would like to know also the percentage, the proportion of all this measurement process.
Okay, so basically we do, as I mentioned before, we do a process that takes around a month in the beginning of the campaign, so that's pre-campaign research, and that takes a month and costs around, depending on the size of the community, it tends to change, but it went from $500 to $1,000, more or less, in every site, and again, we have another process that takes a month and a half in the end of the campaign, where we spend more or less the same amount of money. Now, during the campaign, to understand how the community is actually changing from one state of behavior change to the next one, we need to do research too, like during the campaign. And that is not formal quantitative and qualitative research, it's more qualitative, and it's just basically focus groups. And we do that 2 or 3 times during the time of implementation, and that costs like minimal. It's like $100, sometimes $50. It's basically putting together a group of between 8 and 12 people from the community doing a focus group, and of course offering sometimes beverage or something to drink, or paying for a little room that we can rent when there is no available one in the municipality. But the idea is for the CMs to actually leverage a process where they get support from other institutions and authorities in the field, so they don't have to pay for every single thing they do.
Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you, so probably you can go ahead with the question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear a response. I actually typed the question. You mentioned in one of your earlier conversations that you had to define a system to recover the cost, because persons were asking, well, why should I change my behavior? What is the cost to that? Could you just elaborate a little bit on that intervention or that system that was put in place to recover such a cost?
Yes, absolutely. So as part of the barrier removal strategy, we started working with every landowner to define how they want to manage their farm as a whole. So we create maps with them that are actually GIS tools, where they can see what is the current use they are giving to their land. And then we set them with technical people that told them, look, here in this particular area where you have, for example, cattle, you have one cow per hectare. If you change your system to X of a system, you will have 3 cattle in that same hectare, which means that your income is going to increase in X number of pesos colombianos in this case. So, so that was one system. A second system was working with a coffee producers network to find options to have access, for them to have access to green markets. So the price of coffee that has been produced sustainably is a little bit higher than the other coffee in Colombia. So they have access to this particular market, and because of that, their income increase. So basically what we need to do is work with market chains, work with specialists that help them to understand how they are probably losing money right now, because normally what happens is they take in account how much they spend in seeds, for example, but they don't take into account how much time they dedicate to work in their land. So we basically put that in numbers and show them how they actually lose in their current way they do their productive activity, and how they could actually earn more if they change it. And that's the way we believe that we can maintain that behavior change long term.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have another question for Chandra Menendez. I'm going to open the microphone. She write down the question, but I would like to open the microphone. Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead with your question, please.
So my main concern is the relationship with the governments. So my question will be, if don't we have to work first, or at least at the same time, with each government to install a solution that supports these beliefs? And if not, my concern will be if that movement is going to last in time in the local communities without the government support of the ideas and activities.
Yeah, yeah, your question is very important. I don't know if you, I'm going to go back to one of the slides I presented. And basically in the theory of change slide, you probably remember that we saw here, the barrier removal activities are constant from the beginning to the end of the campaign. So if a particular behavior change desire that you are working on is related to something that has to do with the government, with a local law, with some regulations, whatever it is, you need to include in your strategy working with the government. And that probably needs to be done before getting to the point where you can do the call of action for your local community. Because if that path is not ready, you maybe end up with people that are ready, in our case, for example, to sign up contracts, but if you don't have a legal fund that support the expenses that we're going to have to cover for those, then the system is going to collapse. So you need to do it in advance to create and clean the path for the rider and the elephant to walk. So you need to clear that path first, and then you can go with your social marketing strategy to start moving people from knowledge to attitude and to interpersonal communication, and then finally to behavior change.
Do you have any example of how did you approach this government different hierarchy levels in the past?
Yeah, we've done it. So I'm going to give you an example. This happened in Ecuador. We needed the support of the municipality to be able to run the program, because the municipality was going to be the institution signing up the contracts with the landowners. So it was going to be the authority actually signing up and saying, look, I represent the management committee, I represent the new system that has been created, and I am saying that this is actually going to happen. It turned out that when we started the campaign, the mayor right there didn't want even to talk to our campaign manager. He will talk to her through a third person. It was that kind of relationship. We didn't have access to anything in the municipality. They didn't believe in the program. It was not important for them because it was the end of a period. They were starting campaign to have another re-election. So it was a very difficult situation. So we basically train our CM to break those barriers with the municipality. So she started talking to his assistant first, explain the project, the relevance, and how that what she did was actually focus her speech in how that particular approach could help the mayor to reach his audience, because he was about to be re-elected, right? So she focused that, and she explained him how important it was and how visible he was going to be in the community if he participated in the program. And little by little, it took around 6 months actually, but little by little, he started to listen, he started to talk to her directly, then he invited her to some of the meetings. And at the end of it, and you can see some photos on internet of that particular campaign in Ecuador, at the end of it, the mayor was wearing the t-shirt, the campaign t-shirt, talking in this to probably 500 people about the campaign and being next to the mascot and dancing about in one of the parades. So she had to dedicate 6 months of her campaign without moving anything else, just to that, because she knew that if she didn't have that support, the program was going to collapse in her particular site.
Okay, so interesting. Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you very much. I have another question from Hina Ahmed in India. But before reading, I would like to invite people to write down the questions in the questions tab in the control panel or raise your hand. The question is, what has been your experience in the mascots being adopted by the state governments or national governments to spread more awareness on the issue at hand in the long term?
So basically, we've been changing our approach a little bit, because before the campaigns used to have their own branding system and their own mascot. What is happening little by little is that people actually, especially in villages and cities that are very close to each other, they relate to the same mascot, for example, or to the same kind of branding and logo and slogan. So they are working more in regions lately, because we are starting to work with communities that are close to each other. So instead of having one mascot and one branding system per campaign, we end up having one per region. We haven't get to the point of having one per country yet. I know in Philippines, some of our colleagues are working on that. But at the regional level, it has been very, very successful. The challenge there is that your research needs to be expanded. So to understand better what every community relates to, and instead of doing your research in only one community, you have to go to 10 to understand what is going on there and what are things that actually inspire them and make them feel proud of their own place, to be able to reflect that in your materials. That's kind of a little bit of a challenge, because that implies more time and cost, but for sure it's been a lot more effective when you have regions participating in the program. And then it's interesting, because people from a particular village goes to another village and see the same kind of materials and messages, and then goes to another village, and they feel part of something a lot bigger than just when that happens in a particular community.
Okay, thank you very much for all your questions, for all your answers. I do not have other questions, but I have a raised hand. I'm going to try to open the microphone again. Can you hear us? Hello? Can you hear us? Hello? Okay, I think we cannot do that question. I have another one from Ellen Frank. Let me open the microphone. Hello?
Hello?
Hello, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, my question is about rare fellows. I was looking on the website and I was curious, what type of roles do they play in the campaigns? And what opportunities are there for RARE to partner with local organizations around the world? For instance, we're located in Kosovo, in the Balkans.
Right, thank you for your question. So basically, rare fellows or campaign managers are the same thing. The role they'll play is basically to manage, create from zero and manage their campaign for normally a 2-year period with RARE, and then they continue using the methodology long term with a little bit of support of RARE when they request it for. Opportunities, right now we have two main programs. One is Fish Forever, that is focused completely on fishing activities, especially in the shore. And we have the Watershed Program that is focused in the Andes right now with a very important focus in Colombia, but we've worked in other countries. So those two programs are the ones that are running right now. In the case of Fish Forever, they are working in 5 countries. For other countries, we have sort of a kind of project development. We have a training process that is called C4C, where you can basically buy training, a 2-week training to do this process, and our staff train up to 15-20 people to do this, and then you have to run it by yourself, so you're not going to have support from RARE long term, but you have the course coming from RARE. There is an initiative in China requested by the government to work with organic cotton. So the opportunities are there. You can basically communicate, tell us what is your story, what is the particular topic you want to work in, and then RARE will tell you what are the options that you have, if it will be C4C, or if it will be some other kind of activity that can help you with your particular issue.
Thank you. I do not have more questions now or raised hands, so thank you very much again, Itala, for your time, and thank you everybody for your participation in this webinar. Please check out our website, www.nbsapforum.net, to get the list of resources provided by this webinar. And remember, you can download the recording also from our site, as well as the presentation. I'm Diego Ochoa from the NBSAP Forum. Feel free to send us your comments, suggestions, and recommendations on topics for future webinars. I would like to thank you, Itala, for your time. I hope you all enjoyed these sessions, and please join us in our next webinar in September.
Thank you so much,
final words?
Thank you so much to you, to everyone, and please feel free to contact me. You have my contact details, my Skype, so I'm always there. It will be a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much, and have a good day or night.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.